All right, folks, we'll call this meeting of the Facilities Committee to order. No need to run. Can we have a roll call, please?
Harper. Here. Loxon.
Here.
Rodriguez. Taylor.
Here.
Woken.
Here.
Vantage Steernot. Goss.
Here.
Summers.
Here. All right, can I have a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So moved.
Okay.
I'll
Taylor.
second.
All right, Taylor, and then Wolken is the second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now again, approval of the minutes. Okay, Taylor and
I
Lakshan.
can second for that one.
Thank you. So we have a motion and our second. All in favor of approving the minutes, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Public participation. I don't think I have anyone that wants to directly address us at this time. Any communications from board members, committee members? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to new business. Dana, could you start out with item A, the satellite jail HVAC replacement?
Yep, we've got Richard Van Note here from GHR Engineering, who's been heavily involved in this project. Richard, you want to give him the update on this? Also on our HVAC replacement from hail damage?
Hello again, everybody. As we've kind of discussed, the project that involves the HVAC upgrade for the satellite jail, the number one key there has been the lead times on the air handlers. We've had numerous discussions with the sales rep and the factory. At this time, it still appears that those air handlers are likely not going to be here until about middle July, which is what we've kind of discussed the last two times we've met. In that case, essentially, we are going to complete all of the preparatory work for that project probably in the next week or two is kind of what we're looking at. They're getting really close to kind of finalizing what they can up till now. Then essentially the project will kind of be shut down. We'll hopefully get that equipment in as they've kind of told us in mid-July. Then the contractor will essentially hold on to those pieces of equipment, and we'll go ahead and when the weather starts to become more favorable in late September into early October, we'll start taking a look at getting up on the roof and getting those replaced. As we've discussed numerous times, two of those units specifically do the housing pods, and those are not units that we can take down either during the middle of winter or during the middle of summer. We'll lose control of the building in that case. So once we get the units in July, it's essentially going to be a waiting game. When we start to see favorable weather for a week to where we can take those units down without having issues heating or cooling in that space, we'll go ahead and take the units down and do the replacement. The other large portion of that project was the controls upgrade, which is where a large portion of the incentive money that we've had discussions about during these meetings has come from. At this point in time, about 90% of the controls upgrade has been performed. Essentially everything that's possible to be performed within the jail has been taken care of. At this time, Alpha Controls, who's doing the work for that, they're basically waiting for the air handlers to be installed, and then they can do essentially that final push. So at this time, for the HVAC upgrade at the satellite jail, we're essentially looking for maybe another month at most of work, shut the project down for a little bit, wait to get the air handlers in, and then wait for favorable weather in the fall. In terms of the hail damage project, as we discussed before, we did kind of what was possible up through even like the middle of January, got as many pieces of equipment replaced as we could before then. And then we ran into the situation where we were getting into later January, February weather to where we were having issues replacing units on the roof because we were worried about spaces within the buildings getting too cold. The contractor has all of the equipment for that project in place. As we're starting to kind of get into whether to where we can handle doing those replacements. At this point in time, they're actually looking to perform a large portion of the remaining work, specifically in this building. They're looking to get that work performed hopefully next week. That's the current plan. Get that taken care of. And then after that is complete, we'll have some startup that we need to do on a few pieces of equipment. We have some pieces of equipment that still need to be done at the Juvenile Detention Center, I believe, and maybe one or two pieces of equipment on this building. But essentially, we're looking at being able to kind of wind down on that project here very soon as well. So that's kind of where we stand for all of those at this point in time.
Any questions? Hearing none. Richard, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's move on to item B, which would be County Plaza and program statement. Discussion of space needs.
We've got Carla Smalley here from Bailey Edward Design. Talk about what we've been doing for the last month.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Do I need to move this closer? Okay, great. So as you know, we have been meeting with all of the agencies on all the stakeholders that are planned to move into the county plaza. You can see their names here. I think we went over this the last time. Since the last time I was here, we have moved on. Oh, this was our visioning, just kind of a reminder of what we want the county plaza to be, really this hub of county business. We have since looked at all of the square footage that these agencies occupy now. That's in that first column. We went through a programming effort with each one of these agencies and then documented their ask, what they feel like they need as far as square footage in 5 and 10 years, new employees, employees they have funding for that they don't have space for right now. And then in the far right-hand column, you can see what we've actually been able to provide them at the county plaza, because obviously it's an existing building. We have those constraints. So we're very close in the ask for everybody. We went through 6 different options with the stakeholders and really, put together the puzzle on where everyone could be, what floors they could be on, what they could be next to, what they could not be next to, where their preferences were. This was our first 3 options. I got a lot of good feedback after these first 3, and then I presented these next 3 options 4 through 6. The stakeholders really, and I'm not going to go through all these, but the stakeholders really landed on option 4, which put the clerk, recorder, and treasurer really primarily on the first floor, a little bit on the second floor. The sheriff is on the lower level, and the 4th floor, the public defenders on the 5th floor, and then we have everyone else kind of filled in between 2 and 3. So that's where we're at right now. We have commitment from public defender and from the sheriff. They like where their spaces are, and we've been working on really ironing out where all the offices are, really developing that floor plan, moving into schematic design. We are still looking for, I believe, a commitment from the clerk to make sure that he's going to move his offices into the building. And then I think it's the treasurer and the auditor wanted to reserve their commitment to moving into the building based on the clerk's plans. So that is really kind of where we're at. Any questions?
I would mention one of the things, and I don't want to speak for him because he's here and I'll let him talk, but one of the issues that the county clerk has is to make sure that, I don't know if you commented, but the voting area, one of the voting areas is downstairs. It's adjacent to some nice meeting space as well as the large county boardroom. And the clerk has asked that he have access to the county boardroom when deemed necessary for the number of people who are coming in. Obviously, on the actual voting day, there is no meetings taking place, so I don't see that being an issue. But Aaron, I don't want to put you on the spot, but that's why I invited you here, to put you on the spot. So sorry.
I remember to turn it on, Kyle. Listen. So thank you all. Certainly, Carly, all the work that you all are doing on this. So one of my concerns is the 1,800 square feet being enough for a large number of people coming in to vote. Even when we use the gym, which is 4,700 square feet, we still needed to wrap people around to use stanchions to make sure that we can get folks in the building, inside the gym, and even then some spill over into the hallway. So the 1,800 square feet is certainly not going to be enough for us to do that. So the 1,800 square feet would probably be enough for us to put, 4 stations as far as check-in stations, and then 15 or so booths in there, and allow for the space and the tabulators. So we would definitely need access to the conference room and maybe the boardroom, depending on how many people are there. And what I was looking for is, whether I'm the clerk or whoever the clerk, if the county plaza is going to be the location for many years to come, then we need to codify in the language or in this agreement that the space is going to be available for the clerk's office to access it when necessary. So that was one piece that I wanted to make sure was clear. The other thing is that I went to go look at the building myself. I like the fact that there's a access point on the north side of the building that I didn't know existed, and it enters right into the main floor. But in part of the discussions we've had thus far is that there was a discussion about creating a exit door on the east end, so the voters don't have to come in the same and then go back out the same door that they entered through. So, but when I went to look at the building, the exit from the east side goes right into the parking lot underneath the deck, and I just don't think that's going to work, to have however many people exiting right into a parking lot, and actually it's exiting right into the ramp that comes down onto the deck underneath. So I think there's some more work that needs to be done from that perspective. I was trying to think if there was something else. I think that was pretty much the major concerns that we have from a voting standpoint. I thought there was something else, but
Thank you, Aaron. Do any committee members have any questions while we have the clerk up at the mic? Sure. Go ahead, Jenny.
Just as a throwing this out there question, do you foresee any need to use the boardroom for pre-election services, processes, like the prep space for the vote by mail counting or anything like that?
this really opens up a larger question, because although I think they've done a wonderful job of trying to find the space and the square footage, just because you have the square footage doesn't mean that the layout is going to work. And so from a vote by mail processing standpoint, we have a large sorting machine that has to be placed, as well as an opening machine and a room for processing. So it's been difficult for me to commit, because I can't see what this is going to look like. And if I commit to it and I can't see what it looks like, then I may end up committing to something that doesn't work. So that's why I've been reluctant to say definitely we are on board, and I wanted to make sure that we were clear. Because in the conversations that I've had with other board members or even with the county executive, I don't get a commitment that if the clerk's office needs this space, then it is going to get the space. I get more of a well, I don't know, we can play it by ear, and, and that doesn't work. There has to be a hard commitment that that space is going to be available.
Go ahead.
A follow-up to that is, I think if there was the potential to need the room, would there be additional security necessary, like as far as legal requirements for a space where ballots were
I
held?
couldn't quite understand you. Could you say that again?
Just if there was a need to use the county board or the boardroom rather for voting, is there additional security measures that are needed for a space where ballots may be held or?
Well, as long as the space is locked and no one else has access to it, then the equipment would be considered secure. But if other people are going to be in and out of it, then that's going to be a problem as well.
Any further questions? I will say, fortunately, this is still at the point where no decision has been made yet, so I will hope that continued discussion and communications with the board as well can clarify in answering the questions that you want to have answers to before committing to moving forward.
So I put that issue out as far as the commitment, but I'm not sure if that's a commitment that the county executive makes, if the board has to vote. I'm not exactly sure how that works, so I would love some guidance and some sort of response in relationship to that.
I will work on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions for Carla? Go ahead, Jenny.
I think my question was back on the slide that had the space requests and allocations as they are so far. It looked like there was a pretty big disparity between the ask and the allocation for IT. Is that going to be an issue?
No, we're actually looking for a little bit of additional room on each one of the floors to space some of their servers out. As we move some of the, they're sharing a floor with the sheriff. So as we kind of move the sheriff's offices around and their space and get that really finalized, there may be additional space that we can give back to IT because those are the only two people on the fourth floor. And two, there may have been some spaces that we're looking at sharing throughout all of the agencies. Dana?
Yep. One of the things that we haven't talked about, you don't know yet, but we are going to put a little bit of IT space in the jail consolidation issue. So our buildings are tied together with fiber, and as one of the backups, we want to make sure that that there's some equipment and servers over here. So some of the servers that will be relocated from upstairs over to the jail at a point in time. So that's why some of it's a little bit smaller than what you see.
Go ahead, Leah.
Thanks, Steve. So right before Clerk Ammon started talking, one of the last things you said, and I think I misunderstood it, was that the treasurer and the auditor were waiting to see which way the clerk decided to go. Can you explain that more?
Correct. That is correct. My understanding is because the treasurer and I believe it's the auditor work very closely. Like
It's
the assessor. I apologize. It's the assessor and the treasurer work very closely with the clerk. They didn't want to be in a separate building than the clerk.
Anyone else? I do have one question. I'm not sure how it's probably a relatively unusual one, but I've not seen the building, so I don't know what we're looking at in terms of existing walls. I don't know what plans there are in terms of demolition. I don't know what plans there are in terms of making more permanent walls. Is there discussion about trying to maximize the use of cubicles to allow greater flexibility if things do change in the next few years or 10 years or 20 years to make it less expensive and easier to accomplish?
Sure. Yes is the short answer. And I know that the county has procured additional workstations, and there were some workstations that are actually in very good condition that were left in the building. There is a fair number of requests actually for workstations for part-time employees or for employees that don't necessarily need private offices, in order not only to facilitate future renovations or space reallocations, but to reduce the square footage needed in the building for each agency.
Thank you. Well, I think that concludes. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Leah.
You said that you haven't seen the new building yet or been inside of it. Is there any sort of plan for a facilities committee to be able to go over there like we did touring the jails or anything? Can we do something like that? Would there be an interest?
So what we had thought about, Leah, was that as we're doing this part, we didn't want to have tours of the building because people tend to look at the walls that are existing right there and say, oh, this office will work, this office won't work. Most of those walls may come out and people have a hard time picturing. But once people decide we're the ones that are moving over there, then yes, we'll open the building, we'll go in and walk around and look and see how they can lay out their space and if we need to take walls out or whatever. So yeah, there will be an opportunity to do that. And if the committee wants to go, that's fine too at that point. That'd be great.
So just to clarify, there's not going to be any going inside until everything is decided?
We're trying to make a decision about who's moving to the building because the architect can't lay out the space until we know like who's going to be there and then which floor. And then once that happens, that's just the gross square footages or how the circulation will work. And then at that point, each office can lay out their space that they've chosen in the building. And we can open the building. There's also a lot of things to be done in terms of the lights, the HVAC, so yes, the building will be opened, but it's difficult to picture right now what it will actually look like. And as people are designing, they will be given the opportunity to see the space, feel the space, figure out where the lights are, things like that. So we're just not to that point in the design yet. We're just laying out. Actually, the only thing we need to know right now is who's going to move into the building so they can help make the decisions about circulation and security and things like that, because that matters who gets to use the elevators and how we lay out different floors. Yeah.
I would have to say that from my perspective, the issue is how we accommodate so that we can have everyone move to the building, not whether or not everyone's going to move to the building. And I understand there are barriers in terms of making sure that everybody's needs are accommodated, but the goal needs to be that everyone moves to the building. At least that's my opinion. I think that's the sentiment of most people on this committee. Anyway, thank you. Sure. Go ahead, Aaron.
The question about whether or not we can see the building and whether or not that's going to make a difference. So for me, just being able to see the basement, just looking through the window, gives me insight. And I thought in prior discussions with the county executive and I think Dana, we talked about, we said when we got the keys that anybody who wanted to go and see was going to be able to go see. So now that seems to have changed. Is there a reason why that has changed?
So as I just mentioned, Aaron, the reason that we're doing it this way is because if we start out with having the building, it's like picking a house, let's say a house that's already built. You go in, everybody says, oh, I want this office. I like this, and that office may or may not be right there when we get done with the whole thing. So we just didn't want to get to that point yet. So we're just making sure first of all, we just need to make sure there was space enough for everybody to move. When we started, we actually thought we might have an extra floor and that we could have additional things in the building, but that's not going to turn out to be the case probably. So until we have a decision about who's in the building, then we start having those folks talk about what their needs are in terms of how the building gets laid out. It doesn't really make much sense to have, like, for example, as you know, two of the other departments, the treasurer and the assessor, have already said they would like to stay close to the clerk's office. So if you decide this building isn't going to work for me or this location isn't going to work for me in terms of whatever, they probably won't move either. That frees up the whole first, second, and third floors. So.
Well, I still think there's something to be gained from any particular department head who's considering going over there to at least walk through the space and get some idea. It's a big difference walking through the building and talking to an architect maybe and saying, hey, what's possible here? Because we all, based upon what the architects have shared so far, is that the only one that, from my perspective, would work potentially for the clerk's office is option 4. And we can't claim any other different spaces if that was the case. So I don't think people are going to walk through there and say, hey, I want this or this will work or whatever, because the layout has already been designed. Folks have already agreed to, for the most part, to where they're going. So anyway, I still think that would be beneficial. But this leads more to a broader question for me also, is what will be the commitment from facilities to make sure that Brookins is upkept if we decide to stay? And I haven't heard any conversations at all about what that commitment would be. It would have something to do with the facilities committee, wouldn't it? So anyway, thank you.
I would just say that I think it sells short the ability of members of the board or department heads to be able to visualize a space and find that to be beneficial. I haven't really heard a good reason why not to, honestly, from my opinion, but we will move on. Dana, let's go to item C, the satellite jail consolidation design phase.
We've got Brant Muscaster from Reef Deck Reed here. It's down on the side of the other unit.
There you go.
So we are currently in the process of design development, and we'll be submitting that on May 18th. Last Friday, we submitted a lot of the drawings and information to our pricing consultant, and so they have some time to put together their numbers. A little over a week ago, we had a meeting with the city as far as the code, and went over a lot of issues that we had, questions, and some of the assumptions we'd made with them, and it went pretty well. The one thing we did learn was that we need to have a special use permit. The satellite jail has had a special use permit for it back in the day, and that does not cover any future expansion or anything or consolidation. So we need to get a new special use permit, and that would be requires an application and then presentation to the Planning Commission and then later on to the City Council. And we probably likely need participation of the county to aid in this process. As I mentioned, we're in the DD phase, and so we're picking out a lot of the systems that we're going to be using, refining the design and the layout, selecting like the structural system and the MEP systems, and integrating those into the design with our consultants. And then finally, upon submitting for DD, we plan to have a meeting with the committee to make sure that the design is meeting expectations. And that's all I have right now.
Does any board members have any questions? Dana, what would the timeline look like for moving forward with a special use permit?
We are going to submit it on May 10th.
Okay.
And then it's up for a meeting in June.
Those have been given to county executive and to the sheriff, those dates. Our partner, Reef Tech Reed, will be filling out the paperwork to submit to the city. So we will have to make an appearance at both the committee and the city council.
Great, thank you. Any members have any further questions? None, thank you very much. Okay, item D, the Salt Dome Asphalt Shingle Replacement Project. We have photos attached.
Yep, we've got Carla representing her counterpart at Bailey Edwards. Todd Higginbotham could not be here this evening to talk a little bit about both projects, actually, both the satellite jail, the Salt Dome, as well as Brookins Pod 300. Carla, you want to bring us up to date?
Sure. Yes. So for the Salt Dome, it is approximately 75% or 75% of the existing shingles have been removed. They've placed the underlayment, and they have installed approximately 50% of the new shingles. Weather permitting, they are scheduled to be complete the end of next week. This week. And then Pod 300 is approximately 60% complete. There is some coordination that we are doing with GHR to remove the rooftop unit that feeds this room, and some gas piping work. I believe that is supposed to happen on Tuesday. And then, again, weather permitting, we should be substantially complete in about 2 weeks with the Brookins work.
That's great. Does anyone have any questions of Smalley while we're here? Okay, apparently not. So thank you very much. Okay, move on to item F, discussion of the proposed project labor agreement. Matt Bannock is going to be talking about this. Before Matt speaks, I do want to apologize. In some of the documents that came out, there was a resolution that would make it appear to some that we are moving forward with this immediately. We're having a discussion of this right now, and please just remain focused on the template that's been provided by our state's attorney's office. So I apologize for any mixed messaging that came out. Thank you. Go ahead, Matt.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here for the state's attorney's office as a county staff member. The chair requested, along with some other county board members, that the state's attorney's office assist in the review and drafting process for what could potentially be, should the board approve, basically two things that are composed together in a single document or suite of documents. That being the first, a possible project labor agreement between the East Central Illinois Building and Construction Trades Council and the county and any contractors on particular projects. And then the second part being a equal opportunity in purchasing and contracting component that was lifted heavily from what the City of Champaign is currently doing. For those of you who are in attendance at last week's study session, Ms. Rachel Joy from the City of Champaign came and spoke regarding a portion of the City of Champaign's program, that being their CDAP program and their CDAP vendor list, where they vet and establish a list of minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses so that it can be an easier guide for governments, in their case specifically the city, to contract with and encourage participation of those types of organizations. The packet that was included with the agenda packet, it's a lot. It's about at least 25 pages of documents. I just want to very quickly break down what the four components are of that, because you kind of start reading and maybe your eyes start swimming, I don't know. But the first notion would be, if the board would get to the point where they want to go forward on this, it would be first the board resolving with itself that, hey, we want to do this, and we want to, as a county, move forward on a project labor agreement for a specific county project. That would be a construction or renovation project of $30K or more. And we, as a county, would be empowering the county executive to administer the specific enforcement provisions and monitoring provisions of such an agreement that we'll get to in a minute. Then there would be, as a second component, and if you envision this kind of as a triangle, an agreement between the county and East Central Trades Council saying, we will agree that for this project, we are going to enter into or require a project labor agreement of any successful bidder to contract for this specific thing. And it would, there are, again, certain provisions on there that the general idea is that if a project labor agreement is in effect for a particular project, that the East Central Trades Council would abide by the terms of that, go along with the monitoring provisions of the agreement, and most importantly, not strike or otherwise delay work so long as that's in place. And if there are any disputes that arise, use the dispute resolution process that is in the PLA instead of alternative means. The other component in there is PLA-related contract terms, that if the board would decide to go forward and apply this metric to a specific county project, it would put in a specific future RFP certain contract terms telling bidders up front that, hey, if you want to bid on this project, we will require in our contract with you ultimately these terms or terms substantially similar thereto to establish what the arrangement is going to be. And then there's also the much larger final portion of the document would be the project labor agreement between the East Central Illinois Building and Construction Trades Council and the ultimate contractor for that specific county project, which would then go into all of the various terms regarding conditions of work, hours of work, overtime shifts and holidays, management rights, general working conditions, safety, subcontracting, union representation, work stoppages and lockouts. Article 14 of the actual PLA is where I have, in the drafting process, bolted in the City of Champaign modeled equal opportunity in purchasing ordinance language, which is what they use to encourage, incentivize, and monitor inclusion of minority businesses and women-owned businesses in their purchasing process, as Ms. Joy talked about last week at the study session. And one of the things in the drafting process that I did think was important, at least to give the board something that is that can be considered and is potentially actionable within the next early window of time, is going with local examples that thus far haven't broken the bank at either the university for the PLA language or the City of Champaign for their equal opportunity language. To the extent we can assess, the local market has gone along with those specific requirements, and you'd have to ask either Ms. Joy or someone at the university how they feel it has been going, but for the most part, that has been going on, and there is a consistent local example there. Some of the things I would note is that there are certain things that the board would want to consider is, do you want to do this? Do you want to do something like this but differently? Is the board also comfortable with taking on the additional responsibilities that would come with requiring this type of agreement and monitoring process on county projects? Because you can advance the policy goal of the PLA and the equal opportunity language, but part of that would also be having a commitment to support the county staff that would be required to implement it, and having a commitment to fund whatever necessary provisions are that would go along with putting this additional level of complexity or this additional level of work on county staff and the contractor for a specific project to do all of these various things. I made myself a little list of like, okay, here's all of the things that the agreement would require of either the county or the union or the contractor that are basically above and beyond it in addition to their normal course of business. I'll spare you the recitation of the laundry list, but there are quite a lot of things, and you can read them in the sample proposed agreement there in the packet. It's not to say that it's not worth doing, not to say that you shouldn't be interested in doing, but except that there would be additional levels of complexity that would be layered on top of the bidding, letting, and ultimately completion of county projects if this is the direction that the board wants to go in. And I'll shut up for right now, but at least that's the general context of the at least proposed documents there. Oh, I'm sorry. One last thing is I will note that last week at the study session, Ms. Joy did mention whether or not the county would be interested in getting into an IGA with the city of Champaign regarding explicit use of their CDAP list. The drafted language here does not, at this point, explicitly refer to their CDAP list because we didn't have agreement. They hadn't explicitly said, hey, you can use this and rely upon this. If that is a direction that the board wanted me to go in, I know how to talk to Ms. Joy and the other people at the city to potentially see what there is. I don't know what kind of additional requirements they would have or what our give and take would be in the IGA. That's a further conversation we could have if we want to cooperate and explicitly use that CDAP list as part of this overall project idea.
Thank you, Matt. Mr. Goss, go ahead.
Mr. Bannock, what documents did you use to prepare this agreement?
The templates are taken from a current PLA that the University of Illinois has with East Central. That's one currently in effect. And then the other component of the language is you can see at the City of Champaign's Equal Opportunity in Purchasing Ordinance, where, quite frankly, you can just copy off the website and then tailor the language here to, okay, these are the types of provisions that they use, the types of mechanisms, the back and forth, the monitoring, the reports, those types of things that thus far they've been implementing. And that is put into the packet in specifically the PLA Article 14 is the component where all the equal opportunity language is in there. So yeah, those are the main things that were hybridized together to create that.
Next question, how does this document help county taxpayers?
That'd be a policy question for the board to answer amongst yourselves, is how you want to advance certain goals and respect the other goals. I think it's a perfectly reasonable question, that being you want to advance certain goals as far as positive relations with organized labor, remedying racial injustice and gender imbalance and justice, but also the ethic of being a careful steward of county finances is absolutely a important ethic of the board, and I'd encourage that discussion, but that's quite frankly a debate between you all. I'm just drafting.
Are we, in this document, does it adequately prepare or protect the county with your preparation? In other words, are we protected as a county, not necessarily a county board, but a county in this document?
I guess the lawyerly thing to do would be ask you a follow-up question of what specifically do you mean by protected?
Well, the PLA, as I understand it, is only as good as it is enforced by all parties. again, as you admitted, this document is long, it's hard to understand, and nowhere in there did I see that there's any teeth to hold the other parties to this agreement in case of one of the trades deciding to strike. Yeah, there's some language in there, but there's no punitive language in there, and I don't know, maybe that's decided by a court if it's the case. In other words, if somebody strikes, and this is an agreement, who holds them to the fact that they can't strike? In other words, how is the agreement enforced?
I'll let Matt talk about that, but my understanding of a PLA agreement is if the building trades sign off and are signatory on the document, if there is any kind of a work stoppage, it falls under the mantle of the PLA, and there will be no work stoppage permitted. It would be settled in other means, in arbitration perhaps, but there would be no interruption in work. That's one of the things about use of a PLA that I find very attractive, because it means you're not going to have an issue with labor slowing down your project if there's a problem.
Final question for Mr. Bannock. Do you believe this document will add additional cost to each project that it's used?
I think that's an important and worthwhile question. To the extent that it was possible for me to inquire about that, I talked with someone from the university just this morning and asked them point blank, do you think that this has increased cost for the university on the projects you've implemented it in? And the honest answer was they weren't sure, because it's tough to prove a negative. You can't necessarily prove anyone who decided not to bid because certain requirements were in place in the RFP, and so therefore there's no data. And also, it seemed extremely unlikely that someone would answer the honest question of how much did you charge us over what you otherwise would have because we imposed these requirements. As to the intent behind the question, I think there is certainly a possibility of risk that the board would want to consider, that a bidder may raise their bid in order to satisfy these certain requirements. One could debate whether or not that's going to be a legitimate increase or a reasonable increase, but it probably depends on the degree. I will say that because of the number of additional things that the PLA and the whole structure would impose upon a contractor, well, I mean, we're not expecting people to do additional work for free, so there would probably be, even in the best or worst of circumstances, some reasonable amount of additional administrative costs, because this involves preparing of reports, having specific action plans, like an affirmative action plan, a utilization plan, those types of things. I don't think it's reasonable to expect any firm, even the most good-hearted of them, to do those additional administrative things completely for free. But as far as how much it would be and whether or not it's worth it to you as a board, that'd be for you to decide, or at least to gauge your own level of risk tolerance for that possibility should it come up.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Further questions? Go ahead, Mr. Rodriguez.
Thanks for your work on this. I know we've had multiple conversations on this, and again, it's just nice to see this all kind of come together in paper. I have a few questions, and one Mr. Goss has kind of touched on. Could you talk, one part of our conversations have been examples from other counties to make sure that we are square away with the authority that we actually have. So can you talk about any templates that or examples that you've seen in other counties, particularly Peoria and Will counties, and how did that guide your draft of this?
I do remember back earlier in the year there were things that we looked at from Will County and other things. It was quite frankly very different from the direction I was given from the board as far as what you all wanted, or at least the ones that came forward to me were interested in, that being having something that's a nuts and bolts PLA as far as trade and work management and the equal opportunity in contracting language. So I focused my attention primarily on the most local examples that we could that fit our circumstances. Some of the things that we've talked about in the development process here is certain things that this is not. This is not the same as a PLA that's mandated by federal law or pursuant to a specific federal grant or project. It's not that. It is not a state authorized under state statute PLA, because there are some statutes in the state that specifically address PLAs, but there are circumstances that quite frankly just aren't ours. Also, we've discussed and have considered, okay, the county is a non-home rule unit of government, so therefore there are constraints on what you can just kind of do or, just make up out of whole cloth how you want to proceed. So it's important here to constrain the goals and mechanisms of the PLA and the whole package into the county's inherent authority to manage its own contracting and its own bidding and its own management of work without going far beyond that into other things where arguably you'd be having to make yourself a home rule unit in order to do. But back to your original question of the other county examples, the ones I found that I thought were going to be the most useful were the ones that are already being applied in the local market, that being U of I and the city of Champaign for the two various components.
Thank you. So for the benefit of Mr. Goss here, again, there are other examples of project labor agreements throughout the county that are enforceable, and you can compare. There are also studies that go through the results of these. In particular, one from the Illinois Economic Policy Institute that study the way that these curb costs and make the project in general more sustainable and less work stoppages, et cetera. So again, there's endless benefits to this, and multiple studies throughout our state show that. The other thing that I wanted to ask here, a commitment. No, I'm sorry, I'm going to skip that one. The next question that I had, and okay, let me frame this. So some questions are probably going to follow up with you through phone, but just to kind of set up our own conversation here through the county board, that's kind of what I'm going to focus my comments on here. So the next question that I have here is, you've set the threshold at 30,000 instead of 25. Why is that?
To match the current county purchasing policy that says RFPs are required above 30K.
Okay, thank you. Okay, finally, I just wanted to kind of preview. Again, I've said that I will probably follow up through a phone call. A couple of the edits that I see myself wanting to contribute and flesh out with my fellow county board members, in particular the preamble, and again, a statement of commitments. And this kind of brings me back to my final point here. The original goal, the original draft of this project labor agreement was a community workforce agreement. And that being an agreement not just between the building and construction trades, but with our disadvantaged neighborhoods, in particular those with higher rates of incarceration. We can trace back data in which the way that the county has under-resourced these neighborhoods and give them a living wage, right? This is the way that we have upward mobility in this county. That was the original idea behind this agreement. And for the reasons that Matt Bannock has explained, authority, et cetera, existing examples, we're constrained from that. So I just want to make sure that this is quite explicit. This is a first step. We intend to take this further. And the first step in that is a study session into how to get a data set that will allow us to target project hiring goals for racial minorities, and in particular, those neighborhoods that have been hardest hit by things like racial covenants and redlining. These are the things that we want to correct, and we have a specific and really pointed opportunity to do this right now. So again, this is just a starting point, and I look forward to following up with you through the phone and drafting this out in a way that works for the county.
Further questions? I will say we've got, I'm just going to introduce them, so that'll work out well. Yeah, we do have two representatives of the East Central Illinois Building Trades here. Our executive has some questions. If you guys want to come up to the mic, maybe you can answer a few questions if we've got some from the board, or hear what our executive has to say. I think you need to turn the mic on. There you go. Ms. Kleppel, go ahead.
Thank you.
I just thought you guys probably have the most direct experience with this, so I thought I would ask you keep track of your folks.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I should have entered him. This is it's Kevin Sage, who's the president of the East Central Illinois Building Trades, and Matt Kelly, who is an officer with the Plumbers and Pipe Fitters, and also a member of Building Trades. Sorry about that. Thank you, Jim.
Okay, try again. So I would just be interested, I don't know the answer to this question and was wondering how many of your members in your unions are minorities at this point? Do you have an idea of the demographics? Or women for that matter?
Is this on? Yeah. I think it depends on the trade that you're talking about. Trades have different percentages, I would say. Probably on the low end, certain locals are probably below what our community is. So, I think there's a couple trades that are maybe around 7-8% minority. But then there's also some trades that are above what the minority population here is in Champaign. So you have some trades that are, 25%, that area.
Does anyone else have any questions of either Mr. Sage or Mr. Kelly, since we have them here? Matt, come back up to the mic then. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was curious as to whether the current pandemic has affected your membership numbers or retirements or attrition has influenced your membership up or down, or if it's harder to recruit new apprentices, things like that?
The pandemic, there was a lot of work going on when the pandemic hit, and we had a record amount of work at that time. And so all that work, it was hard to find enough people to finish that work up. Once that work finished, there was not anywhere else for our members to go to. So a lot of them were laid off at that point. We still have quite a few people that are laid off. Some trades are doing better. Trades that do road work, bridge work, they're working at full employment right now. I would say the trades that do vertical buildings, they're a little slow right now. Yeah. And one other point I would like to make, Matt was comparing this PLA to the University of Illinois PLA. They're completely different. The University of Illinois PLA, there's no component for minority inclusion. So that's a completely different PLA than what we're talking about here. So when you're talking about increasing costs at the University of Illinois, it does not increase the cost. Every contractor over there is paying the same wages. The material is going to cost them about the same. So you're looking at, it's not increasing any cost. The only increase that I can see that would be part of this would be just the extra trying to include the community and trying to help out certain areas of our community. It's not the PLA that's costing the money. It's trying to help the community out.
Sorry, Beth. I've got to look around a little bit more. Apologize. Matt, go ahead.
Well, Kevin, you can stay seated. There's a question for you. I'm happy that Kevin's here. We talked on the phone. I just never met him in person yet. Kevin, and to be clear, he was correct that the bolting together here of the equal opportunity component into the PLA component, that is unique. So it's not going to be a direct apples to apples comparison with the U of I experience. But for the benefit of the committee here, could you just talk a little bit about, on a practical, like day-to-day or week-to-week level, how you see the PLA guiding and either assisting or hindering, or however it affects the relationships between the Trades Council and your contractor that's actually, directing the work on the major projects? Like, what things do you guys do through the PLA, or ways that affects your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So with the PLA, the way it works, a lot of the legwork is between the building trades and the contractor. So before the job ever starts, we have it's called a pre-job conference. And the contractor will come down and sit with the group of representatives from the different trades. And we'll talk about the job, what's going to happen on the job, who's going to do what on the job. If there's any kind of jurisdictional disputes, we take care of it right there. That way, when the job starts, we've already taken care of a lot of the issues that might come up. Once the project starts, we stay in contact with the general contractor and the contractors on the job. We want to make sure the job's running smoothly. As representatives of trades, we don't want this project to look bad. We don't want our guys to look bad. We want them to go out there and do a good job. We want them to perform. We want them to be successful. We want the end user to have a good building. So we are pretty hands-on with the projects. If there does become some sort of issue, issue between trades, we take care of that within ourselves. So with the PLA, there would be no work stoppage. Whoever was awarded the work, they keep working on that until we can get our representatives together. We talk about it. If there's not an answer locally, then we'll take it to our international unions, and they will figure out, where we go, whose job it is to do a certain piece of work. But there's no stoppage on the job. And if you look at Unit 4, for instance, teachers were getting ready to go on strike. They were going to picket in front of our schools. I actually went to each job site and told the trades, if there's a picket on this job site, you're expected to go through this. We need you to go to work. We have a contract with Unit 4, with our contractors, that you're going to keep working through this picket. There's just no work stoppages. That's just what the whole agreement is about. So, and then once the project is over, we talk with our contractors, make sure that they're getting everything finished up and getting off the project and making sure it's a good job. So, I think that covers it.
And then just second, and I swear last question from the attorney. To the extent that the PLA would also be bolting on the equal opportunity in hiring language and that ambition and that goal, I don't know if you had a chance to read it or at least consider it. Is the Trades Council comfortable with working with the contractors, if this were to go through in the present form, to try and advance the goals in the manner that's proposed there? Basically, if you guys get asks to go forward and try and recommend these additional people or work with these additional apprenticeship programs or do any of the various factors that can be considered, is that something that you think the Trades Council has the capacity to do and the willingness to do?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. In fact, we worked with some county board members, Emily in particular, and there was a lot more in the language of that actually got cut out. We were trying to go further and try to help our community even more than what I guess your office thought you could defend. So yes, we would. I mean, we're completely on board with that. I mean, and I think I've been talking with Stephanie about some other things. Stephanie Furtado about starting an apprenticeship readiness program. We would like to get into some disadvantaged neighborhoods and help kids understand this is, if you get into the trades, it's a good job. You're going to get a living wage. You're going to get benefits. You're going to have health care. I feel like we can really help our community if we do these things. So yeah, I guess short answer is yes. The trades is on board with.
Just for point of information, Member Rodriguez has worked tirelessly on putting together a document that would help with minority participation in the trades, and we did our due diligence and we talked with our state's attorney's office to make sure that there would be no issue in terms of any liability that would fall back on the county. And it's been the determination of the state's attorney's office that we need to have further study before we'll be able to add specific rules that would force greater participation by underrepresented groups. But I'm happy that we've done our due diligence in working with the state's attorney's office. We have no interest in putting the county in any liability risk. Does anyone else have any questions? Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I don't know if you can answer this or not, but if you can, that'd be great. What percentage of the minority-owned businesses are union shops? Do you have an idea about that? Or what percentage of shops are minority-owned businesses? Whichever way is easier to answer.
You know, in this area, there's not nearly enough, I can tell you that. And so we try to encourage more of our members to become business owners. I don't think that I can't tell you what the percentage is. I don't know, but we need more of them here. I can tell you that for sure. You know, there's certain ones around that our contractors subcontract with, and we could use more of them. But like I said, I don't know what the percentage is.
So do you have any concern? You've obviously worked on this agreement more than we've just read it. Do you have any concern about being able to meet the guidelines that are set forth in this document?
You know, what I would like is boots on the ground. I would like people that are working on the projects rather than just contractors, owners being minorities. I would like more people in the trades working on those jobs. Now, as far as meeting the percentages, I think we can do that. It's going to be it'll be work for us to do. I'm not going to beat around the bush. It's going to take a little bit for us to get there, but with the goals in there, and I think with the trades pushing that, and with the county pushing that, I think that we can meet those.
Well, I guess my concern is to meet those goals, we're going to go outside of the county to do that. And
not necessarily, I wouldn't say.
So you think you're going to be able to meet these goals just staying inside the county?
I think, yeah, for the most part, I think so, yeah.
Ms. Rodriguez.
I think maybe the point of miscommunication here is the difference between, I sure can, thank you for prompting me. The difference, you mentioned boots on the ground, people that we are hiring. Is that different than, say, owners or suppliers? Right? Is offered in other PLAs?
Yeah, to me, you know, when I say boots on the ground, I'm talking about people working on the job with the tools, on the job, earning our wages, earning, you know, each trade's wage, people that are actually working with the tools.
So not just people who are owning organizations and producing the products. Just want to make sure. Okay, great. I'm glad to hear that. The other thing that I wanted to mention here, you said requirements, right? And I wanted to ask of Mr. Bannock again. So we are not able to give requirements on hiring goals. Is that correct? We are able to supply goals on project
Sorry,
hiring.
can you say that again?
Sure. Mr. Goss's concern is that there are project hiring requirements instead of goals. Are we allowed within our current authority to require certain quotas of racial minorities on a particular project or in any case?
Under the current drafting, and again modeled after how City of Champaign does it, you can set percentage goals for individual projects. One of the things that you realize going through a deep dive into constitutional law on race-conscious and gender-conscious issues is that the history of that is not settled in this country, and it's not, shall we say, particularly hospitable to race-conscious or gender-conscious measures unless or until a unit of government can prove certain things as fact that they're making up for in setting hard requirements. So therefore, the language is very carefully selected to encourage, set goals, have ways that best efforts can be done to advance the overall policy goal of inclusion without running the county into a constitutional bear trap of a hard requirement that you can't necessarily back up with particular facts specific to the county and specific to a particular trade. So there's a continuum of things that you could theorize that could be done to advance certain policy goals. This one's carefully calibrated to, with the information that we know under current circumstances, as we can prove them or could prove it in court, what we can do to advance the specific policy goals.
Thank you so much. And finally, well, first I want to ask, does that satisfy your concern? Thank you. Okay, great. Lastly, I just wanted to kind of, again, point to another question. I feel like we're kind of in conversation here. Mr. Goss, I apologize. His original question was, what does Champaign County stand to gain from project labor agreements? What would your response be to that?
Well, I think from this particular project labor agreement, first of all, you're going to get a project that there's not going to be any work stoppages. So no matter what happens, the trades are going to go to work. I don't care. It doesn't matter who goes on strike, who puts up a picket. The trades will not. That's not what we will do if there's a PLA. I think the second thing it does is that it's helping our community. I think that it encourages people from disadvantaged communities to get into apprenticeships. I think that especially with I think, and to me, it goes right along with the Apprenticeship Readiness program that I was talking about a little bit earlier, is that I think that the trades can get out into communities and we can help our communities earn a good wage, which means that they're going to be paying more taxes for you guys. They're going to get health insurance, which is not what you get at every job these days. You're going to get a pension, not just a 401k, not some kind of profit sharing thing. You're getting an actual pension that you can retire on. And I think those things really help the community. And I think that when people have jobs and when people are making money, that makes your community safer. I think that it helps everybody. It makes a lot of problems go away when people have jobs and they're making wages that they can live on.
Thank you.
Just wanted to speak for a minute about minority contractors. I know that in talking with Ms. Furtado, with the small business component that we have had discussions about, we're looking at trying to add some incentives to grow some minority-owned businesses that we currently don't have in this community, or certainly don't have, as Kevin put it, we don't have nearly enough. So we are taking some steps in that direction. Further, I would say that I agree with Ms. Rodriguez that we need to continue to look at ways to provide more equal participation of underrepresented groups within the trades, and trying to determine what is the best path for us to move forward in trying to achieve that end. Does anyone else have any further questions? Go ahead.
Can you give like a ballpark figure of how many men you usually have or how many people you usually have on a project of this size?
It depends on the project. If you're talking about a $30,000 project, there's probably not going to be more than a couple people on the job. You get into an $80 million project, there's probably going to be 50 or more people, 75 people on the project. So it just depends on the project size. I'm not sure. I guess I hope that answered your question.
No, that's helpful. Thank you.
Anyone else? Hearing none, then thank you very much, gentlemen. I appreciate you coming tonight.
Thank you for letting us
We
talk.
will move on to our next our next item. So that is the approval of the lease agreement. We've got a proposed draft.
Thanks. I did send out an updated copy. Actually, Dan sent it out for me yesterday to you. And the only copy I had when the when the agenda needed to go out was the working copy that was sent to you. So you get to see the banter back and forth between Matt and the city of Champaign and MetCAD. So the one we sent out today, everyone is basically agreed to. So this contract that we currently have expires the end of May. It was originally a 20-year contract that fixed their fixed their lease at the same amount over the 20 years because they made a significant investment, $1 million into the facility to have it remodeled. So their rate was $380 per square foot, pretty gosh darn low. We did up it to $6, which is a significant increase. They did pick up some more square footage within the facility. They're up to about 60% of the facility. So we've also increased their utility charge back to 60% of the utilities used for the facility. They also pay 50% for a custodian that takes care of the building 4 hours per day, 20 hours per week. Other than that, just some cleanup of the contract that Matt worked on. Rental increase is going to be by CPI, so whatever it is from the preceding year. For 10 years, it would average probably 2%. This year, it went up to 7%. We'll cap it at 5%. It won't go above that. We'll have to wait and see what the future brings, but we will increase by CPI. Other than that, I think everything. This is a 10-year agreement. Did not want to do a 20-year agreement as we had done previously because there's no investment by MedCat or the city into the facility, and just felt better about a 10-year agreement. We do have an option to extend by a year at the end if all of a sudden both the MedCat and the city and the county are extremely busy and don't get around to producing a contract on time, but our intention would be to redo after that. We like the relationship with MedCat. They're a good tenant. They're very helpful. That's obviously a very important part of what goes on in this community. We pay a fee, obviously, for use, as do the other communities in the county. But any questions about the lease? Anybody read through it? Have something that stuck out?
Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the new lease agreement?
So moved.
Mr. Goss, Ms. Taylor, thank you. Motion and a second. One last chance. Any further questions? All right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I do not believe we have any other business. I have no presiding officer's report. Our next meeting is Tuesday, June 7th, also at 6:30. Items to be placed on consent agenda would be item G or 6G. We are adjourned. Thank you, folks.
Get in and see your boy Casey, man.
If I do that, he'd work on this hand. You know Casey.